This is not just a story about love. It is a story about deception, hidden identity, family pressure, and the power of a humble heart. Welcome to a world where riches are not always gold and silver, but in truth, kindness, and purpose. Let me take you deep into the life of Adana and Chuka, a tale where every scene holds a surprise, where tears turn to triumph, and where love breaks every chain. In the warm, golden sun of Eziyama village, where the wind danced gently through the tall palm trees and the distant hills embraced the horizon like jeweled sentinels, lived a girl named Adana. She was the kind of beauty the earth only revealed. Once in a generation, radiant eyes that mirrored the sky after rain, skin the shade of rich mahogany, and a spirit as bold as the thunder in a storm. Her family was poor. Yes, her clothes were patched and their meals were often meager. But Adana carried herself like royalty because she believed that one day somehow she would rise above it all. Maybe she'd move to the city. Maybe she'd marry for love. Maybe, just maybe, fate would smile upon her. But fate had other plans. One evening, after a long day on the farm, Adana returned home to find her parents waiting with heavy eyes and even heavier news. Adana, her father said sternly, "You must prepare yourself. You are to be married." Adana's heart skipped. Her hands trembled. Married? To who? Her father didn't blink. To Chuka, the son of Mama Nena. He lives by the forest edge. Adana gasped. Chuka, the poor. The quiet man who never speaks. The one they say lives alone in a hut made of cracked clay and palm leaves. Her mother looked down, ashamed. Her father looked away. He came with an offer. He has promised to take care of you. And he helped clear part of my debt with the landowners. Adana stood up in disbelief. So I am the price for your debt. You are selling me like livestock. You will not speak to me that way, her father barked. Her mother tried to calm her. Adana, he is kind. You will be safe. I don't want safe. Adana wept. I want love, but no one listened. The decision had been made. The date was set, and within a week, the wedding drums began to sound. But they did not echo joyfully in Adana's heart. She cried herself to sleep every night leading up to it. She prayed for a miracle that never came. The morning of the wedding came like a heavy rain sudden, suffocating and unwelcome. Adana wore a wrapper of blue and red, the same one her grandmother had worn on her wedding day. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her lips did not smile. The villagers gathered not for joy, but for curiosity. Why is such a bright girl marrying Chuka? They whispered. He must have something we don't know, another muttered. But no one asked Chuka, and Chuka said nothing. He arrived quietly, wearing a simple white tunic and old leather sandals. His beard was neat. His eyes were calm. He didn't look happy. But he didn't look afraid either. When he saw Adana, he bowed slightly and said, "You look beautiful." Didn't respond. The ceremony was short. No feasting. No loud celebration. Just tradition carried out like a duty. The elders prayed. The drums played softly. The union was sealed as the sun began to set behind the baobab trees. Adana followed her new husband to the edge of the village, to the small, crate hut she had only heard rumors of. Inside, the room was simple: one wooden bed, a mat, a water pot, a single oil lamp, and shelves made of bamboo. Adana sat on the bed, her back turned to him. "I know this is not what you wanted," Chuka said gently. She said nothing. "I won't force you to speak or to smile. But I promise you, this sigh will never harm you. This is your home now. You may do with it as you wish." He placed a cup of water on the table and quietly stepped outside into the night. Adana stared at the door. Long after he left, and that night, as she lay on the rough mattress, staring at the ceiling of palm thatch. She whispered to herself, "I am married to a man I do not love, a man I do not know, in a house that feels like a cage." But what she didn't know was that the man she married was not who he seemed, and her life had just begun to unfold. The days that followed Adana's wedding were long and quiet. She moved like a shadow in her new home, sweeping the floor with numb hands, cooking meals she barely tasted, avoiding the man she now called husband. But Chuka was a mystery. He would rise before the rooster's crow and disappear into the early dawn. He returned late, often carrying something in his armsongs: cassava, fish, or sometimes strange things. A bunch of flowers from the mountain, a carved wooden trinket, or a worn-out book in a language Adana didn't recognize. And each night, he placed a small gift for her on the table before retreating to sleep on the mat outside their hut. Not once did he raise his voice. Not once did he complain. He cooked when she didn't. He fetched water when she was tired. He gave without asking for anything in return. But Adana's heart remained locked. She couldn't forget the pain of being forced into this life. She couldn't forget the dream of a different love, a life in the city, a partner who made her. Heart breaks. Not this quiet, strange man who seemed too good to be true. And yet, something began to shift. One morning, she found a book tucked beneath her pillow. Its pages were filled with elegant handwriting and notes in English. She had studied a bit of English in school, enough to understand titles like world economics, entrepreneurship, and the philosophy of wealth. She blinked. Why would Chuka have these? She began watching him more closely. She noticed the way he examined tools in the market, how he explained how to fix a broken lantern to a struggling trader, how he advised an old woman on how to store her grains to avoid rot, how he helped a boy fix a radio that hadn't worked in months. This was no ordinary villager. But when she asked him about it one evening, they shared boiled yam in silence. He only smiled. "I read a lot," he said simply. She pressed him. "But where did you learn to speak French?" "I heard you speaking to that traveler 2 days ago." He chuckled. "I picked it up. Life teaches you many things if you pay attention." Adana frowned. His answers were like riddles. And yet, each one made her want to ask more. One afternoon, a woman came knocking on their door. Her child was sick. She had no money for herbs or a doctor. Chuka didn't hesitate. He handed her a sealed envelope. After she left, Adana looked at him, puzzled. "You give away so much, yet people say you're poor." He looked her in the eye, the flicker of a smile on his lips. True wealth is not measured by what you own, but by what you give away. Adana didn't respond, but her heart skipped another day. She returned home early from the stream and found Chuka drawing in a dusty notebook sketches of machines, diagrams, charts. When he saw her, he quickly closed it. "You draw?" "A little," he replied, almost shyly the next morning. She found the notebook neatly left for her on the table. Inside were brilliant designed solar irrigation systems, water filters, mobile apps for farmers. Her hands trembled as she turned. The pages, these weren't village ideas. These were city innovations. Who was this man? Why was he here? What was he hiding? Hey, and then it happened. One night, the full moon lit the village like silver fire. Adana, unable to sleep, noticed Chuka leaving again. But this time, curiosity got the best of her. She followed him through the forest trail, past the river bend, all the way to the other side of the village. She crouched behind a tree and watched. As he knocked quietly at the door of an elderly widow, he left a bag of rice at her door, turned, and walked away silently. He went on to a sick man's hut and dropped a small parcel of medicine. Then to a boy with no shoes, he left a pair. All in silence. No thanks, no credit, just giving. And disappearing into the night. Adana's eyes filled with tears. She had spent weeks resenting him, judging him. But he had been silently giving life to those around her. When he returned home that night, she was waiting at the door. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice soft. He looked at her for a long moment. "Because I've known what it means to have nothing, and I made a promise to myself. If I ever had enough, I would never let another soul feel that emptiness." She didn't know what to say, and for the first time since their wedding, she smiled. From that night, something changed. She started waiting for him to return. She asked about his day. She cooked his favorite dish of on a boo and pounded yam with being asked. She started laughing again. Their hut didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like home. But deep down, the mystery remained. Who was Chuka, really? Because poor men didn't speak 5 languages. They didn't draw solar plans, and they certainly didn't give away money like the wind. The transformation in Adana's heart had begun. No longer did she see Chuka as the stranger she had been forced to marry. He had become something else, a gentle companion, a man of kindness, a giver without need for recognition, and yet, a man cloaked in mystery because every day revealed a new layer of the man she thought she knew. One early morning, as she swept their tiny room, she knocked over a clay pot. From underneath it, a wooden box slid out. Curious, she opened it. Inside were papers, dozens of them. Letters from cities she had only heard of. Lagos, Accra, Nairobi, even as far as Dubai. All addressed to a C. Ikenna. She thought stamped. Envelopes from banks. Some were invitations to events, conferences, panels. Her heart pounded. This wasn't the life of a poor village man. She picked one letter at random. It was from a tech company in South Africa, inviting him to speak at a global summit about innovations in agricultural sustainability. She froze. Chuka wasn't just smart, he was known. Internationally, that evening, she waited by the fire with the letters in her hand. He came in, as always, calm and quiet. "I found these," she said. He looked at them, then at her. No panic, no excuses. "I was going to tell you eventually," he said. "Who are you really?" she whispered. He sighed and sat down across from her. "I was born here in Iziyama, but after my parents died in a flood, I was taken in by a missionary couple. They raised me, gave me an education, sent me abroad. I studied engineering and technology. I built a software company, succeeded more than I ever imagined. I sold it, I became wealthy." Adana's mouth was dry. "Then why come back? Why hide?" "Because money shows you the world's true face," he said, his eyes distant. "I met people who loved my power, not my person. I was surrounded by greed, fake friends, and empty praises. One day, I came back to Eziyama, and I felt peace. I wanted to remember who I truly was." "So you became a ghost?" she asked, still reeling. "I became free," he said simply. "I wanted to find one thing before I used my wealth against genuine love. Someone who'd see me, not my money." Adana was speechless. Her mind raced back through every small act of kindness, every quiet moment, every smile he gave, and she realized he had given her the chance to love him truly, without expectations, without influence, and she had, slowly, truly, fallen for the man, not the money, not the wealth, just CHUKA. Days passed. She no longer called him the poor man. "My husband." They walked through the village hand in hand. People noticed the shift in her. She smiled more. She laughed louder. She helped him with his secret deliveries. Together, they fed the hungry, cared for the sick. gave sandals to barefoot children, and repaired leaking roofs in silence. Their little hut became a home filled with love. And then, the storm came. One morning, a group of government men arrived with papers. A wealthy land baron named Okafor had bought the rights to most of the farmland in Eziomi, including the land Adana's father farmed. They had 30 days to vacate. Panic gripped the village. Families wailed. Elders wept. They had no money, Cudno, no influence, nothing. But Chuka was calm. He looked at the papers and said, "Only, I need to travel for a few days." He packed a single bag. Adana stopped him at the door. "Are you leaving us?" He looked her in the eyes. "I made a promise, Adana. I won't let this village fall. Trust me." And with that, he disappeared down the path that led to the highway and to the city. For the first time, Adana felt the weight of absence. Every night she sat by the fire, staring at the door. Whispers began in the village. Maybe he's abandoned her. Maybe the pressure was too much. Maybe he was never who he said he was. But Adana held on to faith, because now she believed in the man she had once rejected. And then, 3 weeks later, the sound of engines shook the village. 3 black SUVs rolled into the dusty square. Clean, polished. 4 of the villagers emerged from their huts. Blinking in shock, the doors opened. Men in black suits stepped out, and from the center vehicle, Chuka emerged, dressed in a tailored agbada of deep blue and silver thread. A gold chain around his neck, a polished timepiece glinting on his wrist. He looked like a prince. No, a king. And behind him followed lawyers, surveyors, and a court. Official. The villagers gasped, children pointed. Elders whispered prayers. Chuka walked to the village chief. Holding a stack of documents, "I have legally acquired all the lands Okafor threatened to seize," he said. "They now belong to the rightful owners, the people of Eziyama." He looked at Adana across the square. Her mouth trembled. His eyes softened. "I told you I'd be back," he said. And the village erupted in cheers. There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. That day in Eziyama village was one of those moments. For Adana, it was the day her world turned upside down, not in tragedy, but in awe. Chuka stood in the village square, not as the quiet, poor husband she had once resented, but as a king among men. He held his head high, surrounded by men in crisp suits, government officials, and legal representatives. And yet, he was still the same Chuka. He walked with humility. He spoke with calm. And when the village chief asked the question everyone was dying to ask, "Who are you, truly?" Chuka answered with quiet dignity, "My name is Chuka Ikena. I was born in this village, raised by missionaries after my parents died. I became a student, an engineer, then a businessman. I built a company that now powers agricultural technology across Africa, but I left that life because I wanted to find something I had lost in the city." He paused. Truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Adana stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. She remembered the nights she had wept beside him, the days she had turned away, the moments she had thought he was nothing. And now, he was everything she never imagined. He looked at her and began walking toward her through the murmuring crowd, through the people who suddenly realized the man they had overlooked was the most powerful among them. When he reached her, he didn't smile boastfully. He didn't gloat. He simply looked into her eyes and said, "I kept my promise." She trembled. Her voice barely escaped her lips. "Why? Why didn't you tell me who you were?" "Because the world only sees what it wants to see," he said. "If I had arrived in a convoy like this from the beginning, would anyone have loved me for me? Would you?" Her eyes filled with tears, he continued. "I didn't want to be praised for wealth. I wanted to find someone who saw the soul. Beneath the skin, the heart beneath the silence. And you, Adana, you were the first person who made me feel real. She dropped her gaze in shame. I was cruel to you, she whispered. I judged you. I belittled you. I saw your clothes and your hut and thought I knew everything. He lifted her chin gently. But in time, your heart changed. You saw me, and that's all I ever needed. That evening, the village square was transformed. Chuka's team set up tents, cheers, and lanterns that sparkled like stars. There was food more than the village had seen in years. Music filled the air. Children danced. Elders laughed. It was not a festival. It was a rebirth. Adana watched him speak to villagers. Help the sick, share plans for building schools and irrigation systems. She saw the man who could have ruled from afar, yet chose to walk among them. And her heart, once heavy with resistance, now overflowed with admiration. Later, as the stars began to glow and the crowd dispersed into joy and stories, Chuka took her hand and led her to the same spot they had been wed. It was quiet now, peaceful. He knelt on one knee, not as a stranger forced upon her, but as a man who now asked from the heart. Adana, he said, will you marry me? Again, this time not because you were forced, but because you choose to. Tears ran down her cheeks. She knelt with him. Yes, yes, Chuka. 1,000 times, yes. They embraced, not as strangers, but as soulmates who had finally found one. Another dot in the days that followed. Eziyama village bloomed like never before. With Chuka's help, they built a school, a small clinic, and a new well. Roads were repaired, jobs were created. And at the center of it all was Adana, the girl who once resisted the poor man, now walking proudly beside him. Not as the wife of a billionaire, but as the woman who loved the man before she knew his crown. Time passed, but not like it used, too slow and bitter, like dried leaves drifting in harmattan winds. No, now. Every day brought something new, something beautiful. Eziyama was no longer the forgotten village hidden between hills. It had become a living story of transformation, and at the heart of it stood two people once strangers, now bound by something deeper than gold or fame, bound by love born of truth. Adana woke every morning to the sound of children's laughter outside their new home. It was no longer the clay hut by the edge of the forest. Chuka had rebuilt it not with extravagance, but with thoughtful care. There was light now, powered by solar panels he had designed himself. There were books, shelves filled with knowledge for every child who came by. There was music, always. Music and a constant fire of joy in the compound. But most of all, there was peace. Adana was no longer the girl who cried on her wedding night. She was now the woman who hosted reading sessions for village girls, who helped women learn to manage small businesses, who served with her husband in the field, not behind him, not beneath him, but beside him. She had once judged him by what he wore. Now she saw the glory in his silence, the wisdom in his humility. Chuka was still the same man. He didn't parade his wealth. He didn't boast of what he had. But now, when he walked through the village, heads turned not in mockery, but in respect, because everyone now knew what Adana had learned, that true power wears no crown. It moves in kindness. It speaks in action. It loves, quietly. And then came the day that sealed it all. The renewal ceremony. Chuka and Adana decided to wed again, not out of obligation, but out of joy. This time, it wasn't organized by elders under pressure, or families in fear. It was a celebration of choice. The entire village was invited. Music echoed from drums that thundered like the sky. Women danced in circles of color. Ululations rang into the heavens, and the earth itself seemed to rejoice. Adana wore a glowing white gown woven with beads from every tribe in the region, a symbol of unity. Chuka wore a regal abaya, but beneath it, he still walked barefoot, his silent message that wealth had never lifted him above the people he loved. They stood beneath the giant Iroko tread the very place he had once gifted her silence on their first night. Now he gave her his vows. I came to this village hoping to hide, he said, but instead I was found. Not by fame, not by riches, but by a woman who looked past everything and still chose me. You, Adana, are my greatest treasure. Adana's voice trembled as she replied, I once hated the life I was forced into, but in that pain, I met a man whose heart was richer than anything I had dreamed. You, Chuka, are the answer to a prayer. I didn't even know I was whispering. The crowd cheered, children threw petals in the air. The drummers pounded their rhythms harder. The village square, once filled with gossip and fear, now danced with laughter and joy. And as night fell, the stars above the hills seemed to shine brighter than they ever had in the years that followed. The legend of Chuka and Adana spread far and wide. They weren't just known for wealth, they were known for how they loved, how they gave, how they turned the forced union into a legacy of hope. Their story was told in other villages, whispered by fires, shared in market songs, taught in schools as a tale of humility, redemption, and unexpected love. Asterisk, asterisk, thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment "end" so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching for? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to thee. Next one, stay happy. Goodbye.